Richardson. Welcome to my presentation on enterprise scale AI infrastructure for clinical research. I'm Travis Richardson. I'm Chief Product Officer for Flywheel. Thank you very much for attending. So as the title suggests, we're going to talk about some of the challenges associated with scaling AI and delivering that in the context of clinical infrastructure. So today's agenda is really about the challenges associated with data management for artificial intelligence and ultimately federated learning. Flywheel, plays a role in research collaboration broadly. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the unique challenges of data management associated with machine learning in general, and then we're going to talk about federated learning and sort of some of the more advanced issues associated with that. First off, a little bit about Flywheel, if you don't know who we are. Flywheel is a research informatics platform that is aimed at the challenges associated with data management for biomedical research and collaboration. We started at Stanford University in the context of imaging research with a strong orientation towards scientific reproducibility and enabling collaboration in that context. And this is a high-level way to look at the platform. So it's a software system that can run in all the major cloud platforms, as well as on on-premises infrastructure. And at a high level, you can see that the main functions of the tool are capturing data from multiple modalities. We specialize in imaging, but we're really strong at any file-based biomedical data, especially those files that maybe involve kind of heavier, more complex objects. Similar to imaging. So that data can come from imaging instruments, your PACS, VNA systems, really any biomedical file-based data. We have lots of tools for getting that data into the system. We have tools for de-identifying the data, which is extremely important and dealing with healthcare data. Once the data is in the system, it's essentially what we're doing is providing a metadata database to organize all of your data and keep track of everything. Labeling, search, classification of data to help you organize data at scale. To support all of that, we have a computational framework. This can be used for anything from basic pre-processing to full analytic pipelines and machine learning tasks. It's essentially managing containerized workloads and doing elastic scaling those up and down. We also have APIs for everything. It's very much an open science platform. So if you want to just interact with data in the platform from an external tool, you can certainly do that as well. But unlike a PACS or a VNA system that you may be familiar with, Flywheel is designed around research collaboration. So everything is in the context of secure projects. If you're in a research institution that's going to associate with IRB compliance and institutional review board compliance. So you have a secure project with only the right data and only the right users allowed into that scope. And you'll see later as we talk about federated machine learning projects, which are essentially multi-site collaborations. That can play an important role there. So our customers use this for imaging research, where we started. Because of the curation process and the data management process, was associated with machine learning, a lot of customers are adopting Flywheel for use in preparing and organizing their data for machine learning. And of course, since we're web-based and secure, we're very well suited for multi-center studies as well. So our customers range from academia to clinical to life sciences and medtech AI developers, using Flywheel to manage their data. What our customers typically have in common is they're all seeking to maximize the value of their data to support research and innovation. If we think in terms of NIH principles, we talk about FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So Flywheel helps with that in many ways, but the ability to find cohorts via metadata management and search. The accessibility is provided through open APIs and tools, interoperability via standards wherever possible, and reuse is a strong focus of Flywheel around not only sharing of data, but sharing of algorithms in the platform, as well as any derivatives from various processing. And as I said earlier, this demand to get to FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and all the associated processing and pre-processing that goes with that is very useful in the context of machine learning. So we're seeing a lot of interest driven by machine learning initiatives. So our vision as Flywheel, since we focus on research collaboration, is really to help research institutions, collaborate in and amongst themselves, allow life sciences collaboration as well, and then enable collaboration across these institutions. So you can look at the research institutions have a wealth of data, algorithms, expertise. The life sciences companies are seeking innovation, solve key healthcare problems as quickly as they can, get to market. So it's a natural opportunity for these organizations to collaborate together. Of course, they do today, but as we get into machine learning and larger scale deployments, federated learning becomes very important. And we think Flywheel is well positioned since we work already with nearly 50 or so top research institutions, both on the clinical side as well as on the life sciences side. So our goal is to enable these organizations to collaborate securely, effectively, to solve healthcare problems. Let me give you a few quick examples. University of Wisconsin is one of our research institution customers, and they use Flywheel to essentially collect patient data and secure that data and deliver it to the research community in their School of Medicine. So it's we started in the radiology department and actually around a head and neck cancer spore, cancer research. But broadly, they're ingesting large volumes of imaging data, electronic medical records. They have clinical trial systems around REDCap, EDC type things, collecting clinical data. More recently, we've been doing work on digital pathology with them. But broadly, the idea is that they can collect that data, put it in a secure project context, and then make that data available downstream to the researchers, who are doing imaging research, machine learning, multi-center studies, as I described earlier. And Flywheel helps them organize the data, curate the data, pre-process the data, track what they're doing, and kind of manage the research collaboration. Another example of Flywheel, it would be in the context of multi-center collaboration. So this is an Alzheimer's and Down syndrome project that is the folks at UC Irvine are the data core for that, and Dr. Mike Yassa there, and Adam Brickman's team at Columbia University contributes data, as does Diana Rosas, her team at Massachusetts General. But ultimately, Flywheel is used to collect that data, process that data to a common standard, and they can all collaborate across the country and work on that data together. Finally, a quick example here of very large-scale machine learning in a very large pharma is an initiative we have with one of the world's largest pharmas around their global strategic platform for AI and precision care. So the Flywheel system in this context is used to ingest very large volumes of historical clinical trials data, whether that's coming from CROs or from external real-world data partners. But they pull that data into their Flywheel system, capture that data, organize it, quality control the data, and the data that's been quality controlled is then made available for reuse in downstream projects. So they can search, find cohorts, create new projects, and make that data available quickly to their downstream machine learning team. So roughly 95% of this is all machine learning based, and Flywheel helps them organize and do this at scale. This system has close to 1.5 million studies in it, for example, so it's a fairly large scale system. So let's talk a little bit more about machine learning workflows and how some of the challenges there and how we might help address those. So first off, those of you involved in machine learning today know that 80% of the problem is data management. The actual training, while technically challenging and interesting and complex, is dwarfed by the complexity and scale of managing the data over time. Whether you're preparing the data for your first iteration or you're managing it over time for subsequent iterations, it's a big challenge. And so Some of the factors here are, just getting your hands on the data at the necessary scale. So, in clinical research, that typically means getting data from patient systems, that type of thing. The institutions are rightly concerned about data privacy and security in that context. So there's usually some overhead for ensuring that in the form of de-identification and reviews and so on and so forth. AI increasingly deals with diverse data types, imaging, EEG, genomics data, wide variety of data types, some of which are, naturally tabular, some of which are complex binary data. Quality control in that context is a challenge. Data is labeled in many different ways, and so you want to look at standardizing that so you have good inputs into your machine learning process. And then tracking all these activities at scale is a big challenge. You need to be able to document what you've done. There's sort of a scientific reproducibility element to this. And there's also sort of the necessary audit readiness to support FDA approvals and similar, regulatory approvals for your downstream results. And so this is a big effort. So let me help you understand a little bit about how Flywheel or tools like Flywheel can help. So first off, the way we look at this is there's kind of four major areas where we can help in the machine learning lifecycle. So it starts with finding useful data, and in that context, Flywheel can ingest large volumes of clinical data. We can help with the de-identification, as I mentioned earlier. We can help classify and label that data so that it's useful as inputs into research and machine learning. And the search capabilities of Flywheel, the metadata extensibility and search capability, gives you a framework for managing very large volumes of data at scale, classifying that and doing the necessary cohort selection to meet the needs of new machine learning studies, for example. The next area is quality and consistency. The old expression, garbage in, garbage out. It's very important to understand what you've got going into your machine learning, your training algorithms, and so on. Even though you may want to have some tolerance for quality issues in your data, you want to make sure that you're dealing with the appropriate scope of data. So in Flywheel terms, we can do a lot of automated image processing, whether that's pre-processing format conversions, things of that nature, but also quality assessments to make sure that the data is in range and scope for the necessary application, and also to make sure all the data is complete. So many studies have a set of related data that are required, and you can manage the cohort and ensure that all the data is compliant with the overall protocol for your project. And so Flywheel does a lot to help you with quality. I'll give you some examples of these things in a minute. Labeling and annotation. If you have imaging data, for example, and you're looking to train a model to identify specific features in that data, you may indeed want to go through and have experts label that data so that you can find the objects that you're interested in. And Flywheel has tools for doing that kind of thing. So we have integrated viewers with image annotation capabilities, and we have tools for organizing blind reader studies, with multiple expert radiologists, for example, reading and annotating the data to provide high quality labeled data for your ingest into your training algorithm. And then of course there's the training process itself, training and scoring and tracking the provenance, and Flywheel can help with all of that. And I'll touch base on how these things work here in a minute. So first off, just finding useful data. So typically Flywheel is used to ingest, large volumes of patient data, clinical data, often de-identified. But that data may come from existing research projects where you want to reuse the data for other purposes, downstream machine learning. Could be used to create data lakes of data that's research ready that you want to draw from and make it available for new projects. Could also be just simply ingesting radiology reports, parsing those using maybe NLP, natural language processing, to identify some structure so you can identify cases that are relevant, and then maybe go back and get the detailed data to support your project. But Flywheel's search engine, the extensible metadata framework that we have here, makes it very useful for organizing and finding the data that you need to create your, populate a new project and build a cohort for your machine learning application. So that's the first kind of step in the equation. And I mentioned natural language processing. This would be a practical example of how that might apply to help you with cohort selection. So here on the left, what we have is, what might look like a typical radiology report. It's just all text written by a physician who's a radiologist who's read a report and made some observations and findings about that report. But it's largely unstructured in terms of how you might find reports or cases that match your specific criteria. And in particular, you might be able to find a search term, but maybe there's many synonyms. You have to assess the text in order to, assess whether the feature you found is actually present or not present. So negation broadly. And so Flywheel's processing framework uses something called gears, and gears are automated containerized workloads. And we recently implemented an algorithm, natural language processing algorithm called TBI extractor, which is a natural language processing algorithm that reads the report on the left here and produces a structured output as indicated on the right. So in this particular case, it's identifying, I think, 27 different pathologies and whether they're absent or present or abnormal, that sort of thing. So you can see that by taking that raw text, converting it to very specific named pathologies and whether they're present or not, that gives you a much more structured ability to query for those or to generate data sets that provide more structured data frame type inputs into a machine learning application. So another example is managing data quality. So let's say you have an imaging project, you've got complex objects here that maybe brain scans and MRI data case here on the left. So first off, we have visual, viewers for visual inspection and image annotation that can help you just visually inspect and make sure your data makes sense. And we also have Flywheel gears that can automate quality assessments. Of a common one in the MRI world is something called MRI QC, which does a whole series of metrics. Performs a whole series of metrics and generates reports that make it very quickly to look at the overall quality, either human inspection of those generated values, or even just reporting and making sure you're within tolerances and so on. So this would be a common way to automate quality checks along the way, just to systematically make sure everything is prepared and properly the quality is in shape. Finally, I mentioned image annotation. And in this case, Flywheel has integrated viewers, and you can structure reader studies around the idea of a work list. So you want to have a radiologist go through and read a set of images and annotate them, and answer a series of questions about them to kind of serve as labeled inputs into your machine learning. And Flywheel has tools built in for doing this. Certainly you can use external tools and save the data and metadata in Flywheel. But in this case, we've got these integrated viewers. You can create customized ROIs of various types. Regions of interest with different shapes. I want to measure, or I want to create a box or a freehand outline or contour. That kind of thing can be all configured. And on top of that, we can insert a customized qualitative summary form. So this might be the type of thing that you would do in a spreadsheet without a tool like this. But all of it's built into the viewer. The radiologist or the expert reader, just opens up the work list and goes right through and efficiently works each of the reads, annotating and answering the questions as appropriate. And then the nice thing is all of that is stored in the Flywheel database for your project and is all now API accessible. You can create data frames for ingest into your machine learning or other reporting. And of course, it's all searchable as well. So you can use this to organize your data in various ways. And then ultimately what we're showing here is that you can, prepare your data for machine learning through the tools and, finding the cohort, quality checking, labeling, but ultimately you can also manage the training process. Now, Flywheel is not a AI tool in the sense that we're really agnostic about which particular tool sets you use for training, but we're very focused on the process of machine learning and data management associated with that. So obviously we're excited to be partnered with NVIDIA, leveraging their technologies for organizing machine learning and for efficient computation around machine learning. You can use your favorite toolkits with Flywheel. Those training processes can be managed in Flywheel as containerized workloads, just like you would normally do. But also, if you have an externally optimized environment, existing workflows and maybe optimized infrastructure, Flywheel can cache the data to that location, allow you to do your training, and then ingest the results. But ultimately, we're preparing the data, we're helping you train and retrain, so that's typically an iterative process. And then ultimately you get a model back, and you can even apply that model to new cases to do validation and testing and track the results, and so, provide all the data necessary to support, future iterations. And as I mentioned earlier, everything in Flywheel is tracked in great detail. So you have all the records of which version of which model was trained on which data sets, and so on and so forth. So you can support your regulatory approvals and ensure scientific reproducibility. So that's how Flywheel broadly helps with machine learning. So let's talk a little bit about federated learning for a minute. So the world is about to get more complicated. So why federated learning? So first, there's growing interest in the idea of federated learning in healthcare for many reasons. On one hand, you have data sets are getting larger. Many applications require increasingly large and diverse cohorts. Data privacy is a key concern, and will continue to be a concern. And increasingly, large healthcare institutions are growing resistant to selling healthcare data. The old model might be, yes, I'll sell you some data, you can perform your analysis on it, we transfer the data. But the risk of introducing, first off, sharing people's personal information is just largely frowned upon. Secondly, just the risk of security or privacy breach, is high. So there's this, need, but challenge associated with that. So, but on the other hand, the machine learning promise is great. The potential to automate and provide better care at a much lower cost is still important to everyone here. And federated learning is really seen as an efficient way to enable people to learn from healthcare data, but while reducing the data privacy and security risks and the stigma associated with selling data. I think broadly, what we see is that healthcare institutions are very interested in collaborating to improve healthcare, but they have an obligation to manage the downside risk there. So federated learning with the ability to send the model over and use the data and then just take the result without violating anybody's personal privacy is seen as very attractive. But let's talk about some of the challenges in federated learning. If you think about this, how will this all take place and scale up? Well, first off, we've got to get access to clinical patient data in a collaborative environment. So again, you're moving outside of the clinical care world, and you're leveraging that data for research purposes. So the data is typically got to be de-identified and maybe very diverse, as I described earlier. But you've got to, federated training exists in a secure sandbox. So you have to, land that data quickly and efficiently, in that world. Cohort selection is a challenge. Most healthcare systems have that data, in a variety of different systems. So, being able to ingest that, identify what data is available, and then get it into that secure environment quickly is important. Just like we discussed earlier on the machine learning side, broadly, data consistency, labeling, those types of challenges still exist. But then you start thinking about, well, how am I going to train across potentially multiple institutions? And, the issues of the data consistency become more pronounced because institutions will use different protocols, label things differently, and so on. And the cohort distribution has to be managed to be statistically relevant for the machine learning. So how will that be coordinated? And then a bigger issue that's less technical but very important is, what are the business terms going to be for enabling these organizations to work together? The old model where partners go and everything is managed on a one-off basis, just won't scale. So there's going to have to be some changes in terms of collaborative agreements that are maybe broader than the one-off contracts. So let's look at some practical example. I mentioned earlier that the University of Wisconsin is a customer and is using Flywheel for their research. This is an interesting project they did recently using NVIDIA's Clara platform to build a set of models that score COVID in chest X-rays, and the result was a very high performing solution that was in fact recently commended in a published report, which was largely critical of data management for AI, but it was one of the 4 projects that were sort of commended for doing it right. But they use Flywheel to essentially pull in large volumes of chest X-ray data, some medical record data with PCR test results. The project was big enough that they needed data from a partner, so this was a multi-site collaboration. And then they also ingested data from the NIH to use as control data. So they had some healthy controls to compare to the COVID involved data. But they use Flywheel to pull all this data together into a secure environment. And remember, these are people all working from home, trying to work together. So they were able to use the platform to label the data, organize that data, and ultimately they used NVIDIA's Clara platform for the actual training itself. And again, the result was very strong. So, what they will tell you is this was largely a data management problem. And then they were, once they got that under control, they were able to use their, NVIDIA tech very effectively to get a high performing result. So how do we see federated learning, and what's our role in it? Well, first off, there's excellent technology out there, and the investment in federated learning models and techniques is improving. We're super excited about what NVIDIA is doing in this world, in the medical environment with MMARs and kind of standardizing how those interfaces will work. So our role as Flywheel is really to help accelerate getting data into a secure environment where those kinds of federated applications can be performed. So again, Flywheel can ingest large volumes of diverse medical data, healthcare data, put it in a secure sandbox, quality check it, help you label it, and then using NVIDIA Clara and similar technologies, the partner sends over the model, the training algorithm for them to analyze the data and generate a model. And where appropriate, Flywheel can speed the transfer of data that might be needed to support regulatory regulatory approvals and so on. But generally speaking, what we're doing is helping get the data in a secure environment so that federated training can occur. And then because we have a network of many top research institutions, what we're working quickly to do is to help them collaborate effectively so that you could have a diverse network across institutions to support, larger scale, more diverse cohorts. And many of these institutions are already using Flywheel to streamline their access to healthcare data to support their own research. They're all very interested in collaborating amongst each other to improve healthcare, and they're also open to commercial collaborations with life sciences, but want to do it in a way where the data is secure, the data management is cost effective and scalable. And so that's where we see our role. So we're super excited again to be working with NVIDIA, and particularly around Clara. And we've got some very interesting projects and a lot more to come. But we feel like we've got a great solution for speeding and scaling data access for these types of applications in federated learning.